Before we get started, does anyone want to get out?
Feels so funky. Feels so funky.
Hello everybody and welcome to Cinematic for the People. It's episode 4, it's the 23rd of May 2018. I'm one of your hosts, Alan Kerr. I'm joined as always by Andrew Craddock.
Hello, Alan.
Today on the show we're going to be talking about a new documentary called Filmworker. It follows the life of Leon Vitali, who was, again, the right-hand man to the legendary Stanley Kubrick. So we'll talk about that and then a bit about Kubrick in general. Then we'll look at some news and some trailers and anything else we've been watching over the week. Andy, how are you doing?
I am well, thanks, man. I'm sweltering in this heat.
I know, another beautiful sunny Glasgow day.
Yeah, so aside from that, good, positive day work-wise. I just realised the author that I've been working with on a manuscript is an actor who was in RoboCop.
Oh, what? Really?
He was the guy who got shot to pieces by Ed 209. You remember him?
I do, yeah.
Yeah. He's now he's still an actor, but he also writes books about psychology and mindfulness for actors.
Huh. That's pretty interesting.
I just clocked it today that was who it was.
So that's our first contact in the biz then.
I don't know that I'll get in touch with him to talk on our podcast,
if
but
anything,
you
we
never
should
know.
exploit your job.
Every single avenue, yeah, sure. So that's how I'm doing. The usual. Just caught a bunch of films this week. Maybe talk about a few of them later. What about yourself, man?
Oh, college is coming to an end in a few weeks, so existential crisis, that sort of thing. You know how it goes, I'm sure.
Nah, it's been many years. I've forgotten my many existential crises.
Good use of the word crises. You can tell you're a copy editor.
Thank you.
But
you'll be all right, man.
Well,
stay strong.
We'll see. Really relying on those Casper mattress sponsorships coming in any day now.
Any day now, man. And Audible sponsorships. Yeah, the lot.
Squarespace.
Fingers crossed.
So, this movie, Filmworker, a documentary, we saw it at the GFT, the Glasgow Film Theatre.
Yes.
Did you see it in the new Cinema 3?
Yeah, that's the only one it was shown in, I think. Yeah.
If you're in Glasgow and you're familiar with the theatre, it recently got renovated. It's a very old kind of art house theatre. Really, really nice building. Yeah,
lovely. Art Deco. It's just been redone. I think about 12 months ago they did the big refit finished. It's been going on for quite a while. Then they've kind of brought back that kind of classic Art Deco feel and sort of shined the place up a bit. Got rid of a very busy cafe, so they must have sacrificed a fair bit of it.
Have they not moved it upstairs?
No, they've got a sort of bar area now. But anyway, they sort of put in a new third screen, which is a lovely little screen. I don't know what you thought of it. Is that your first time that you've been in it?
Yeah, since the refurb actually.
Oh wow, okay. I've been in screen 3 many times. It's my favourite screen. When I got a pick of Isle of Dogs for the opening night at Film Festival, they were showing it in all 3 screens, and I picked to go into screen 3, even though it's much smaller than the other 2. I just find it kind of comfortable and a much crisper screen and just really nice.
I like the seats. They're kind of like old airplane seats.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. It's the only screen in the GFT with cup holders, by God.
Oh wow, really?
Yeah.
I did notice the cup
holders. But that's where we both saw Filmworker.
Yeah. You want to tell us the synopsis?
Sure. So on Letterboxd, our synopsis is. There we go. We got a pretty lengthy synopsis for this one.
I know, you can abridge it if you like.
I'll read it until I get tired. So on Letterboxd, Filmworker. It's a rare person who would give up fame and fortune to toil in obscurity for someone else's creative vision. Yet that's exactly what Leon Vitali did after his acclaimed performance as Lord Bullingdon in Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon. The young actor surrendered his thriving career to become Kubrick's loyal right-hand man. For more than 2 decades, Leon played a crucial role behind the scenes, helping Kubrick make and maintain his legendary body of work. In Filmworker, Leon's candid, often funny, sometimes shocking experiences in the company of Kubrick are woven together with rich and varied elements, including previously unseen photos, videos, letters, notebooks, and memos from Leon's private collection. Insightful, emotionally charged anecdotes from actors, family, crew members, and key film industry professionals who worked with Kubrick and Leon add an important layer of detail and impact to the story.
Leon was a spirit, the apprentice that all of a sudden one day became the master with all the answers.
Daddy, you gotta listen to Stanley. Look scared, look back, left Danny, turn right.
Look around now, hesitating.
He was my acting coach.
Come and play with us, Stanley.
It wasn't even in the script that they were twins. I was just looking for someone who was good. And he looked at it and he just said, well, there's no question, is there?
Stanley assigned Leon to me.
Sir, no, sir! Are you a Peter Pupper?
Speed it up, fast.
If it wasn't for Leon Vitale, I doubt I would have done half the job.
Oh my God.
Stress.
I mean, oh yeah. There was just so much to do.
Leon was always
It was
working.
like pow. Stanley never trusted anybody. He just did. Everything had to be to the millimeter.
It's your responsibility to make sure they understand exactly what you want.
Inventory, timing sheet, trailer, translation, lab work, color time, layout. I don't know how to do layouts. Sure you do.
So there you go. Who needs to see the film
I
now?
don't think we even need to talk about it now. Right.
So overall, what were our thoughts
We both seem to, I think, give it a 3 out of 5 rating on our...
on our letterbox?
Oh,
yeah.
actually, did you do a
I
letterbox
rated
review?
it, but I didn't review it.
Okay.
I don't know. Like, I don't know. I have this weird kind of hang up about reviewing documentaries. I don't know why. Like, I feel like there's less to critique other than the kind of the content of it, I suppose. Obviously, you can talk about the editing and I mean exactly what we're going to do now. So maybe after this discussion, I'll have more of a kind of rounded opinion of what I could say about it. I thought it was okay. Yeah, it didn't blow me away. But yeah, the strength of it, I think, is the kind of just the kind of strangeness of that kind of central relationship.
Yeah, it's an unusual relationship to a degree. I think for me the biggest strength of the documentary is the sort of anecdotal side to it when we actually get Leon Vitale, who's quite an unusual character. I think you'd agree.
Yeah.
But not in a sinister way.
He's not in a creepy way or anything.
No,
yeah,
he's a sort of pleasant, eccentric individual, I would say. And he's obviously much older than I remember him. I'd seen him in Barry Lyndon in that Lord Bullingdon role, which I loved him in. But I think when he gets down to just actually, when they let him, have a little story about Kubrick, and he kind of goes down that little path of unscripted storytelling about little experiences he had, I found that kind of stuff fascinating. And seeing him going through his records and his files and all these photographs that we get to see, and just all that backstage behind the scenes footage. And I think we spoke about this briefly last week. Like, Kubrick wasn't a particularly didn't like being in the public eye. He was a very reclusive kind of guy. And just wanted to focus on his family and his films. And I think this gives you that little glimpse into the personal life of Kubrick through the life of somebody like Leon Vitale. But the film very much is about Leon Vitale. But I think a lot of people who are going to see it are going to see it just because of that connection. Yeah. I mean, that's why the film's been made, really, isn't it?
Well, that's kind of how you sold it to me. As, I was there. You come for Kubrick, but you stay for Leon, I guess.
I think that's the I wouldn't say problem. I didn't really have a problem with the film. I thought it was really, really good in parts, and just a little bit pedestrian in others. When it got down to the business of, actually getting into Leon's own sort of, his own story, that aside from Kubrick and his own, his own story up until then, it seemed much more sort of, I put it in my letterbox review, like psychologically complex and tragic to a degree.
Yeah, definitely.
And it feels like, maybe through his own choice, there was a couple of moments in the documentary where he wanted to stop talking about things because he was quite emotional about it. I don't think he really wanted to get into him per se. It was really him and Stanley, as he calls him, Mr. Kubrick to us. But I think they really only kind of skimmed the surface of where they could have gone with maybe looking into the dynamic of that relationship. Did it seem a little bit of a sort of one-sided relationship to you? Like, what did you think of that? The relationship between Kubrick and... It
reminded me, maybe not with any of the kind of sexual connotations, but it reminded me of the relationship between Mr. Smithers and Mr. Burns.
Do you know, I never even thought of that, man. Yeah. He's kind of fully surrendered to every whim of his like idol. And yeah, he has this immense kind of respect and admiration and love for him. Because he just came across as like a very kind of easygoing guy, and Stanley Kubrick was kind of the exact opposite of that, like kind of very intense, very demanding. So yeah, I think that maybe they both kind of complemented each other. Maybe they both needed each other. Yeah.
But like you were saying about how the strength of the film you thought being the more anecdotal stuff about Kubrick. I felt it was very much like a film of two halves. Like the first half was all of that, all of the kind of behind the scenes stuff, and then up until the point where Stanley Kubrick dies. After that, they kind of focus more on Leon and his family life and his personal life and stuff.
Sure.
And it felt like a real change of gears. Like I would have thought it would have been better to kind of weave that stuff throughout it.
I get you. I liked when they brought his kids into it though, because up until that point, I guess I'd been kind of wondering what's this guy's story. So I quite liked the fact that they withheld that to a degree up until then. I just think when they did get around to telling the story, I wish they'd kind of gone into it a little more. It was nice to see his kids now grown up, like talking about him and hearing their perspective, which by all accounts sounded like, you know, he basically devoted his life and time to Stanley Kubrick more than to them.
Yeah, none of them called him Dad even. They all called
him Leon, didn't they? That's right. And when they did make that shift, I thought it was really interesting because I had no idea that he was so heavily involved in kind of finishing the post-production on Eyes Wide Shut. Which, once you've seen the film, is not surprising when you see the kind of input that he had in terms of archiving, in terms of restoration, just every little facet of behind-the-scenes work that could possibly be done. He had a hand in.
A big part of the kind of stresses that are put on him is that Kubrick was like involved in every single aspect of everything to do with his films. Like
he tried to retain total control over things as best he could.
That comes down to like the artwork for the VHS release
being 1 inch off of where it should be and having to reset everything,
and like the displays that will be in the windows of shops selling his videos,
or in the case of Full Metal Jacket, no display in the window of the shop, so having people out taking photographs on his behalf.
And then he would get angry about it and then kind of put it on Leon to fix it to his vision.
Do you remember in the doc there's a part where basically we find out that Kubrick used to write letters to studio heads at Warner Brothers, but sign them with Leon Vitali's name.
Yeah.
So, you know, Leon actually seemed to kind of be... He appreciated the fact that Stanley Kubrick trusted him so much to basically write in his name. He felt kind of honoured, but at the same time, I think felt like it would have been nice if he'd checked, I think as an audience, we're kind of thinking, like, who would do that? Like, who would write a letter and sign it someone else and go, oh, by the way, like, I've complained to the head of Warner Brothers in the UK, but he thinks it was you.
Yeah.
It's like, fucking hell, man. Like, yeah, you get that glimpse into, like, that very fine line between genius and madman that was, I expect, somebody like Kubrick.
Yeah. It just seems like a 1 in a million kind of, like, pairing, these two, that they found each other. Like, that someone would be kind of that kind of eccentric and intense as Stanley Kubrick, and need someone to like devote themselves to fulfilling his ideas and stuff, that he would meet that exact person who would be so so open and so, I don't want to say a pushover, but like,
well, I mean,
a wee bit.
In terms of the dynamic of the relationship, you're absolutely right. It's a little harsh because, like we both say, like the guy seems like a nice guy, Leon Vitali, but certainly that alpha beta sort of.
Did you think there was
mentality.
an element of him being taken advantage of?
Definitely, but at the same time, I could see that he didn't really seem to feel that way because he had this, like you say, he'd surrendered himself. It was that Smithers-Burns relationship where Smithers, or Leon had just sort of said, oh, well, that's Stanley, that's what he's like. Yeah. And he just kind of went with every whim. I mean, his kids at one point were saying, like, he was on 24-hour call.
Yeah.
He'd literally get a phone call in the middle of the night and it would be about like, oh, did you check the rushes for the day? Did you make sure the colour temperature was correct?
Yeah, it's a big pet peeve of Stanley Kubrick, it seems.
Yeah, and in fairness, I mean, looking at, films where they've gotten away from the creative control of directors in the past, no fucking wonder. Like, you see the colour control. I've seen like a thing where William Friedkin was trying to redo the colour on The French Connection because every release that had come out on DVD he said had been wrong and it looked like shit. So he like personally sat down years later and supervised the Blu-ray. So like, can you imagine like if Stanley Kubrick were alive in the era of Blu-ray, like he'd be getting Leon to go through all that with him? And
like, I can't remember if they explicitly say this, but does he still work kind of like for the Kubrick estate?
Well, that's something that I'd made a note of during the film. They never speak with anyone on camera from Kubrick's family, which I found would have. I mean, I imagine because they basically didn't give it their it's essentially unauthorized. I don't think the Kubrick family have given it their thumbs up as such, or maybe they have. But
that would make sense, being he was a private person and stuff.
Yeah, but them not being on them not sharing their memories of him is maybe a little that would have lent it some gravitas. But to your point, at the end of the film, we get a sort of title card that says, after the filming of this documentary, Leon has now been employed by the Kubrick estate.
Right.
He's basically doing the same kind of work for them now that he was doing under Kubrick. Because I think after he'd done the Eyes Wide Shut stuff, he wasn't really, I don't think that he was employed from that point on. There was a talk when they were doing the Kubrick exhibition.
That was very sad. A lot of it was very sad, I thought.
And he wasn't invited, consulted upon, and yet he still took people who knew him, people in the business. There was a little bit with Phil Rosenthal from Everybody Loves Raymond, the producer, talking about how he had some friends that wanted to go, so he would take his friends around just because he loved Kubrick so much. He would tell them all the behind the scenes stuff. It just seemed, like you say, there were a few people in the know about who this guy was, and nobody who was actually in charge of setting up stuff like a big exhibition. What was the museum? Was it in New York?
It was either New York or
I think it might have been in New York, but the big, huge museum, a huge exhibition of all of his work, and nobody in charge of running that thought to get in touch with him.
Yeah.
But there were a few people who said you should have gotten in touch with him. But yeah, to answer your question, at the end of the film, we get that little thing that just says, after the filming, he's now working for the Kubrick estate. So I'd like to think that he still is.
The fact that there is no one kind of from Kubrick's point of view really reinforced the idea that it is a kind of a one-sided relationship, because it's all from Leon's point of view.
Definitely, yeah.
People talking about how it affected him and stuff.
Because he talks at length for a part of the documentary. He talks about being around Kubrick and Kubrick's family. He would sit around the house with them, and his kids would come and sit around the house with them. And from all accounts I've heard of Kubrick, it's weird, when he wasn't on set, he was very, very much a family man, but he spent a lot of time on set and working.
Yeah.
But he didn't want to talk about films with people. If people wanted to talk to Stanley Kubrick, he either wanted to talk to them about family or money. Apparently that's the only thing. I think it was John Landis who said he spoke to Kubrick. Any time he did, Kubrick would tell him, here's a really good way to save a few bucks when you're taking this kind of shot. He was always trying to talk about the financials of movie making, never about the art and the craft, which seems a little weird to me.
Yeah.
You would not expect that. But I think he had that kind of Hitchcockian thing where Hitchcock, although Hitchcock was very much a 9 to 5 guy, he would clock in at 9, clock out at 5 and go home. He would not be in the studio till all hours trying to get that one shot like Kubrick would be. But yeah,
well, that's interesting if he's kind of. I would imagine that the reason behind that is because he sees it as a personal thing, that he doesn't want to necessarily dissect or share with other people.
I think also he's probably devoting so much time to his craft and to getting it right that when he's away from it, it's too exhausting to even start to think about it again, because the moment those cogs start to turn with somebody like Kubrick, he can't get away from it, and it's he has to start the whole thing over again.
Which that maybe gives you an insight into how much he did trust Leon, that he would share that part of his life with him.
Absolutely. I mean, I'd never even thought, when I knew about Kubrick and being the kind of control freak that he was, it never even would have occurred to me that he had somebody who he would have trusted to that degree. Mm-hmm. He wasn't his assistant. He was he was a film worker, as he put down on his visa application.
Yeah,
he was sort of above that.
The point of the title of the movie is that he's asked what he does for a living, and because he does everything, he's AD, he's secretary, he's planner. Has
to look after Danny and The Shining.
Sometimes, babysitter.
Yeah, coaches actors and their lines, helps write dialogue for them.
Yeah.
The bit with is it Lee Ermey from Full Metal Jacket, the drill sergeant, talking about they would just sit and rehearse in the trailer together, because that's what Kubrick wanted him to do with him.
Yeah, and he would happily go along with it.
Yeah. What did you make? This is something I wanted to just bring up with you. Very much when we're not with Leon Vitali, and we're not seeing archival footage and photographs, they do have a pretty decent selection of talking heads, I should say. They dug up Ryan O'Neill from Barry Lyndon, and we had Matthew Modine from Full Metal Jacket. Do you think it would have been nice to see some slightly bigger names in there, like
Yeah, like that, like and they have Stellan Skarsgård.
oh yeah,
for
Stellan
maybe, like,
Skarsgård.
5 minutes.
Yep. Yeah, it looked like they got him for like
Yeah.
like just as he was about to finish for the
And
day.
like, it doesn't. I don't even think he kind of added anything that necessary or insightful to the documentary. Like, I think it was just because he was a name that you'd recognise. Like,
Yeah, and he also had a relationship with a director that was similar to that when he was in theatre. He talked about when he was in theatre, there was a director that he devoted like a number of years to basically trying to understand the craft. But there was a few people, I think Modine and Ryan O'Neill both said they could never have stopped what they were doing and just said, yeah, we're going to work for you.
Yeah.
Ryan O'Neill said when he finished filming Barry Lyndon, he fled. Because he was like, the last thing he wanted was to get a phone call saying he needed to come back and do any more reshoots.
I thought like this sounds really harsh, but like it felt a bit cheap to me. A lot of it, like they were working with what they could get.
Yeah, I think when you're working with films of that magnitude, it's difficult like to really get like. Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to get the sort of biggest names, you're looking like, hi, can we speak to Tom Cruise about Leon Vitali? Can we speak to Jack Nicklaus about Leon Vitali? Nicholson, sorry, not the golfer.
No, he probably doesn't know him.
I don't. Well, he might.
So, no.
Can we speak to these guys about him? Like, that's a whole nother level of a fee that you need to pay for these guys, and I don't even know what the fee would be to get Tom Cruise to sit down.
To hear what Shelley Duvall had to say.
Yeah, sure. I mean, some of the behind the scenes stuff from The Shining with Shelley Duvall that I've seen prior to this is like she had a torrid time.
I mean, we could talk a bit more about that in a wee minute once we talk about Kubrick in general a bit more.
Sure.
But yeah, like it felt like, I felt like they were working with what they could kind of afford to get.
Yeah.
It all kind of comes back to the kind of overall sadness that I felt for it, that like they were trying, for all intents and purposes, have a celebration of this guy Leon who's like been in the background his whole life. And it kind of felt like they had organised a party and like not everyone had showed up.
Sure.
With this movie.
I think there's something to be said there, yeah. Like specifically, I'd be interested to know if they even approached the Kubrick family about maybe their recollections or not. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe they are just like very secretive and just don't allow access to that kind of stuff.
It could be. I mean, it could be all these things. I don't think the cheapness, if you want to call it that, it definitely, it didn't feel like a big budget production. It didn't diminish my enjoyment at all. I just felt it would have been really cool to hear from some other names.
But are you? Is that because do you just want a full documentary about Stanley Kubrick?
Maybe there's a little bit to that. I think
do you think
I would
it would
have
be
just
better if it was a Kubrick documentary and then a separate one just about more like about Leon and not splitting the difference?
No, because his story probably. I mean, no offense intended here at all, but his story isn't big enough to warrant a feature documentary. Of course, they sort of coexist together. So that part of it is fine. I think something that I'd noted down that's always a danger with these kind of documentaries is when you get the footage from the movies, you sometimes sort of, if the documentary isn't like blowing you away, like you said, sometimes I felt like, man, I really wish I was watching like Barry Lyndon right now, or not. I didn't get it to like a huge degree where I didn't want to be watching the documentary, but it did make me think like I'd really like to be watching Barry Lyndon rather than thinking about what I was seeing on screen. I was just kind of thinking about some of those clips and just wishing that I was watching them sometimes. What did you think about that?
I think it made me think that I would rather, like I said, have a full documentary about Kubrick.
Okay.
Like the stuff with Leon was fine, and he's an interesting person, but I don't think he's kind of willing to look at himself closely enough.
That's a good point.
To make it that interesting. Like he doesn't seem interested in
his story.
Yeah. Which kind of like you said, whenever they go to him, he's like happy to talk at length for what shade of blue Stanley Kubrick wanted the tint of the film to be. But when they ask about him, he gets a bit upset, a bit emotional. He's like, I don't really want to talk about that.
That's true. There's a couple of moments in the film.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's like you say, he's an interesting and sort of affable guy, but maybe there is that. Maybe this is why neither of us felt totally engaged, because there was that sort of split between the Kubrick story and the Vitali story.
Yeah.
That maybe never quite came together.
Yeah. You asked me what I thought of it afterwards, and I messaged you saying it was pretty sad. And yeah, like when I think about him as a person, I think him like quite bleary-eyed, old guy.
Yeah.
Who's just like, you know, his reason for being died, and now he's just kind of like living in his memories of that.
Sure. Living in like the shadow that he's left behind. I think as well. I'd seen, like I said, I'd seen him in that role in Barry Lyndon, and I remembered him as a sort of handsome young man. So when I saw the first shot of him, I was quite surprised. Like, you know, he's got the kind of straggly beard, and just sort of looked pretty run down.
Yeah, definitely. And they talk at times about how like after Kubrick died, he kind of really fell on like hard times financially. Like his son had to like support him and stuff, and that's just such a shame that like he was so close to like this giant of cinema,
the dynasty, if you will. Did you not like that? For me, that's why that bit at the end that said he'd been employed by the Kubrick estate, it kind of didn't diminish the sadness. It kind of bounced back a little bit and made me think, well, at least there's that. At least like
where he wants to be.
Yeah, I mean, and like he's not going to struggle financially if he's employed by them and doing what he loves. Yeah. So like it did seem strange to me that after all that like work that he'd put in, that he'd just be sort of forgotten about
like,
for a while.
I think more than like celebrating the work of Stanley Kubrick or even celebrating the life of Leon Vitali, like this film did the best job of celebrating the unsung heroes of filmmaking, like the people behind the scenes that you don't see.
It's a really good point, man. The film workers, definitely. I think actually, did you sit to the end? I sat to the end of the credits. They actually have a thank you at the very end, and all the film workers.
Yeah. Oh, that's good.
Yeah, that's the point.
I did not see that. No.
Like I have a thing where I just sit to the end of the credits most of the time, hoping for that Marvel cutscene.
Sam Jackson shows up and
Filmworker, the newest entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Leon Vitali gets inducted into the
Avengers 2.0.
You get anything else written down there before I move on to the next thing?
There was one other thing I wanted to ask you about the technicalities of its release. It was actually released on VOD and iTunes at the same time as it was in the cinemas.
Oh, really?
Which I didn't realise at the time, because I like to go to the GFT and support it. It's a small art house place, but you know, you could have rented it. I guess the rental cost would have been $5.50 or something.
And the cost I got was $0. So.
Oh, you got a little freebie?
Oh, did I not tell you that?
No, you didn't. No.
Yeah, shout out to
friend of the show
and manager of the GFT and host of the Monster Closet podcast, another Glaswegian podcast about video games, which I'm sometimes on. If you want to check that out.
Plug.
Yeah, thanks for hooking me up. Much appreciated.
I got a little student discount from a friend that works there. But I'm there all the time, so I don't feel guilty about that. So I thought I'd got a good deal. I didn't want to even tell you, like, oh, I got a sneaky student discount, and you're like, oh, I got a freebie. Anyway,
I thought I had told you. Sorry.
So no, I just wondered what you thought about that. Like, do you think? I mean, I think we both know the answer. This isn't the kind of film you'd go, you have to see this on the big screen. Very much suited to home viewing if you wanted to check it out. And I would still recommend it to people. I wouldn't. We're not maybe raving about it, but the fact that we've actually gotten some mileage out of just talking about the guy it's about, I think it's kind of done justice to the story to a degree. And I would still recommend it to people to check out. And it's already available to rent on iTunes and whatever other platforms are available.
It'll probably get a bigger audience that way than it would get a big cinema release. So
yeah. Oh, real quick, how many other folk were there in the cinema when you went to see it?
I was going to mention that. It was actually more busy than I thought it would be. It was maybe like 20 or 30 people over there.
Wow, and you went in the afternoon?
Yeah.
And screen 3 holds 100, maybe?
Yeah, that looks of it.
If that. There were about 6 people in the cinema with me, and I went in the evening. When I was really surprised by that.
Oh, yeah, you went right after me, didn't you?
I think I went in the show later, the later one to you.
No, I was quite surprised at how many people were actually there.
Okay,
it was good to see.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. I was surprised by how few were there, considering it was like Kubrick footage was promised. So, interesting.
I imagine a lot of those people were there for that.
Oh, and to most of the extent, I think you and I both were as well. So
let's talk a little bit about kind of the work of Stanley Kubrick and kind of him as a director or as a person.
Sure.
Which of his have you seen? Because I've actually not seen that many of his films.
How many have you seen? While I quickly look up.
I have seen probably the bigger ones, like The Shining, obviously, 2001: Space Odyssey, and Doctor Strangelove. I've never actually seen Full Metal Jacket all the way through. I think I've seen the first half of it.
The funny thing about Full Metal Jacket is when people talk about it, they tend to only remember the first half. The second half is a drastic shift.
And even then, it wasn't like I switched off or whatever. Like, we were at a friend's house and it was on, and then we had to leave.
Right, okay.
So I was only even half watching it. I've not seen A Clockwork Orange because, like, it's one of those films like Jaws was for me for a long time, where I've seen it so much in pop culture. I've seen so many parodies. The Simpsons have done it so many times.
Sure.
That, like, I feel like there's nothing for me to get out of it.
Okay.
And also, it just seems quite a heavy watch, I suppose.
A Clockwork Orange is. I mean, it's heavy, but it's a smashing, smashing such a non-committal word. It's a phenomenal watch. It really is.
And I've not seen this kind of earlier stuff. I've not seen Barry Lyndon. I've not seen Eyes Wide Shut. I do remember. I think I got a video from Blockbuster or Global Video actually.
Remember those video stores?
And it was, I don't know, it was probably some Adam Sandler, something, Waterboy or whatever.
Sure.
But it had a trailer at the beginning of it for Eyes Wide Shut, and it was just like a kind of a slow shot going up the leg of a naked Nicole Kidman from behind, and I was like 12, and I was like, oh my god, what is this movie? Should I be watching this? Am I going to jail? But that was my first kind of, I guess that was my first introduction to Stanley Kubrick.
That was your first introduction to more than just Stanley Kubrick, but that's things.
I've not seen Eyes Wide Shut.
Okay, I've actually not seen Eyes Wide Shut either.
The trailer.
I'm a big fan of the trailer by the sounds of it. I have seen a little more than you, but not much more. I mean, that's the thing, he didn't make loads of films. He was not, he wasn't prolific by like a Ridley Scott standard where he made, or a Woody Allen standard where he made like a film a year or a film every other year. So I've seen The Shining, 2001, Clockwork Orange, Doctor Strangelove, Full Metal Jacket, and Barry Lyndon.
You were raving about Barry Lyndon last week.
I love Barry Lyndon, and it's one of the latest ones of his that I've seen. It. I think I saw that after all the other ones. It's so good. I don't.
What is it even about? I know it's a period.
Yeah, so
drama?
It's about this guy called Lyndon Barry, who.
Wait a minute.
Yeah, so no, it's not Lyndon Barry. Sorry, Redmond Barry. He ends up marrying into like a higher sort of level, an aristocracy. He's a sort of commoner essentially who gets into some bother at the start of the film. He's in Ireland. He has a duel at dawn with an English general, army guy, for honor,
of course,
as it was, and it's all set in the 18th century. And basically it's about the kind of misadventures that he has as he has to leave home because he shoots and he thinks kills this Englishman. So he has to go on the run. And on the run, he gets into like the most ridiculous predicaments, getting enlisted into the English army, then getting enlisted into the Prussian army by mistake. It's a comedy, but it's a very Kubrickian comedy. It's all over the place and in the best way possible. It's basically misadventures of Ryan O'Neal as Barry Lyndon. And the only reason he hired Ryan O'Neal is because Warner Brothers wanted a big name in the film. So they said to Kubrick, we'll fund this film, but your leading actor has to be from the top 10 like highest grossing movies from like last year. So he looked at it and he picked the one at the bottom, like deliberately, which was Ryan O'Neal, who I believe was in Love Story the year before. They went to production with Barry Lyndon.
It's very petty.
But yeah, that's Kubrick down to a T though, and the film is awesome, man. It's the one of the best technical things about it, if you ever get around to watching it, is it's all lit with natural light, so it looks exactly like it would in the 18th century. So there's no arc lamps like blaring down on anyone. It's all candle lit in the interior shots. There's all these gambling scenes when at one point he works for like a professional sort of swindler who like gambles with people but cheats to get their money. And it's all lit with candles. It's absolutely stunning.
That must have been a nightmare to film.
Again, Kubrick down to a T. And no wonder Ryan O'Neal said he fled by the time it was over. So, I think Kubrick probably thought Ryan O'Neal wouldn't even want to work with him, like, because he was more into like doing like romantic comedies and stuff. But yeah, that's probably my favourite Kubrick film, but that's he made so many good films that you could sort of change your mind on that so much. Like I saw The Shining recently last year at the cinema, and that is just a masterpiece for me.
I think that's the only one of his that I've seen in the cinema.
They're actually re-releasing 2001 next month, I believe.
Yeah, my kind of head lecturer in my course at the moment is like a kind of a fanatic of this movie. He's a model maker and like
Of 2001.
Yeah,
Yeah, no wonder.
He has made several of the ships and different crafts and stuff from that movie.
Oh, he's made replicas of them.
Yeah, he's obsessed with it. Like
Wow.
Tom Hanks actually has made he has my lecturer has a quote on his website from Tom Hanks talking about him and how they're both fanatics of 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Right. Okay.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
That's cool. I mean,
but yeah, like from that point of view, like I really like 2001, but I would probably say The Shining is my favorite, because it's a bit of an easier thing to watch. It's a bit more straightforward,
which is interesting to say. It's like
shorter.
easier to watch when there's a man hunting down his family with an axe, but I totally get what you mean.
Yeah.
I mean, 2001 is a stunning film, but it's such an existential mindfuck to a point.
Yeah, like a lot of people have told me before I watched that like, like the first act is a bit, and then the last act's a bit mental.
I think I got told that as well, but I didn't agree. I just couldn't take my eyes off. Like, I know that they're totally different, like, acts it goes through, like, it jumps through time, essentially.
That ending, I love the ending because...
Me too, by the way.
It's totally the kind of thing I'm into, of, like, I really like it. I think I may have mentioned this before. I like it when a sci-fi movie conveys alien life in a way that is kind of beyond our comprehension.
Sure.
Which is exactly what that ending is all about. Like, it's just him still throwing images at you, and like I'm sure that he has an explanation for it, but it is in no way spoon-fed to you.
No, and it's one of those endings that's just so beautifully done that you could create any kind of sort of backstory to it and invent what you come up with what you think the theory is.
Just everything about the mystery, like with the monolith and how it's all kind of it's peppered through the film, but like I mean the main narrative is kind of like the astronauts kind of head to head with the AI, but like there's so much more going on that is like nice window dressing, I suppose, that is like elevates it. Like that central story is great. Like it's a really tense, like kind of creepy movie at times.
Sure.
But yeah, it's just surrounded by strangeness and thought-provoking imagery and
every chapter of the film for me is strong. You've got the opening with the apes, and then you've got when the monolith appears on the moon. Is that correct? They dig it up on the moon.
Yeah.
And then that doesn't seem to end very well.
And it's so cool looking. Like, what a great idea to have it just be a big black slab.
Yeah.
Because like that's almost like foreshadowing of like Apple design, Like,
sure. Yeah.
Like future technology just being like. Not like back then, I assume it would have all been kind of knobs and dials and flashing lights and.
Well, there's this idea, I guess, in the film that the monolith is not technology per se, but it's way beyond even that. Like you talk about a sort of something that's way beyond our comprehension. But certainly the production design on that film is amazing. Yeah. The production design on all of his films was pretty incredible.
I love Christopher Nolan as well, and you can his influence is. Stanley Kubrick's influence on Nolan is so apparent. Like
Nolan is doing or was doing an introduction for the 70mm presentation of 2001. He was very much involved in the publicity of it all. Yeah,
like Interstellar would not exist without 2001. The spinning hallway.
Yeah,
in Inception is very reminiscent of the kind of the treadmill runway in 2001.
And when everybody asks Ridley Scott where he gets his like inspiration for keeping sci-fi like grounded and making sure that it doesn't get too kind of out with reality, so people can sort of relate to it, he just says Stanley. That's his answer. Just go back to 2001. The rotating ship, all that stuff. Always take influence from that.
And even like the influence on like something like Star Wars.
Yeah. I believe a bunch of the people that worked in 2001 worked on the model making and stuff on Star Wars.
Yeah, like
Douglas Trumbull was one of them.
That name sounds familiar.
He laid
the groundwork for what sci-fi could be in cinema and stuff.
Absolutely. So that's a cracker, but I mean, like,
I can see why people wouldn't like it. To be honest,
I guess like. I don't agree with him, but
I don't agree.
I can see why people would like The Shining because of the sort of the facade of the whole thing. There's and I think The Shining has got a depth to it as well. But it's like when we were talking about Deadpool last week, there's an audience member who's laughing at the jokes on top, and there's an audience member who's sort of maybe seeing the stuff that's beneath the surface, and that's particularly predominant with like auteur directors like Kubrick and Nolan.
And like similarly with The Shining, like that ending, like it's just one shot, but like it says so much. It makes you think so much.
The panning in on the photograph, yeah.
And like who else? What other directors have had like so many mental conspiracy theories written about them?
Oh, about like faking the moon landing for NASA and things,
and
Room 237 documentary.
That's terrible. By the way, have you seen that movie?
I've seen it. It's not a great movie, but I like the fact that we get a lot of Kubrick footage in it again.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, but people study him like just so intently.
Yeah, there's people who watch The Shining like, and that's all they watch, so they can unlock more clues to it. Yeah, stuff like that. That's a bit nuts. But in terms of movies I haven't seen, Lolita, Paths of Glory, Spartacus, The Killing, and Eyes Wide Shut. I'd probably like to watch a couple of these soon, based on the fact that I've seen quite a lot of nice footage from them in that documentary we saw this week.
Yeah.
I actually own a few of them on iTunes, and I didn't even realise.
I know that I was looking on kind of the streaming services, and I saw that Eyes Wide Shut and Spartacus were available on one of them.
That'll be Prime Video.
Either Prime or Sky Movies.
Oh, perhaps Sky, yeah.
Thanks, Dad, for that.
Shout out to Alan's dad there for that.
But yeah, I forget that he did Lolita and Spartacus all the time. Like,
well, yeah, he was brought in for Spartacus at the last minute.
Oh, really? Is that right?
Yeah, he was. I think they had someone else in mind, so he was sort of brought in after the fact. They deal with that in that movie Trumbo.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they talk about that. They make a little joke about it. Like Kirk Douglas, the guy that's playing Kirk Douglas, is like, the director's driving me nuts, and Trumbo's like, what's his name? It's like Stanley Kubrick.
Speaking of director driving them nuts, like he was kind of famously had a bad relationship with Shelley Long. Shelley Duvall?
Yeah.
Who's Shelley Long?
I don't know.
Shelley Duvall, I meant
okay, a little slip there, but
on The Shining, where he pretty much tortured her, yeah?
Yeah. I think, to get a performance out of her.
He wanted her to be like, the character is at her wit's end and is, on the verge of a nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
And he pretty much brought the actress to that point.
Yeah, that's like when a director doesn't have faith in the actor to just act, and like Friedkin when he was shooting the shotgun in the back of like behind people during The Exorcist.
Like that along with this documentary, it brings up the question of like, is it worth it for a lot of this stuff, like to get the outcome you want with your art? What sacrifices should you make?
I'm not a film director.
Like, I don't think in today's climate, people wouldn't put up with that.
You simply wouldn't get away with it. It's one of the reasons he worked in England is I think because there was different regulations and stuff that he could get away with. Although that's interesting because I believe George Lucas struggled making Star Wars because the regulations were stricter in England when they were filming than he was used to in America.
They talk a bit about that. Like, I never thought about this until I was watching the film. That he had to work with a child, obviously, in The Shining, and the rules around that are very strict.
And they flouted them all. Like, they just
so he had Leon
faked the diary of when he worked. That's right.
Make a false diary of like a schedule, because I'm sure they were breaking all the laws about child labour and stuff.
And speaking of which, just real quick, it was nice to see the actor who played Danny grown up in this film.
Again, only for
But again, very praiseworthy of Leon Vitali. Talked very highly of him and how comfortable he made him feel on the set. And yeah, that was nice.
I don't know, anything else you want to say about Kubrick before we move on to some news?
I probably didn't do a great job of describing Barry Lyndon because I'm just like, it's brilliant, everyone should watch it. But basically,
is it actually like an out-and-out comedy?
It's a comedy adventure caper.
I always just assumed it was like a kind of a
period drama,
a very dry period drama. Yeah,
it's got this unreliable narrator to it who's narrating to you as the scenes go on because it jumps through the years, and the narrator will say, and at this time Redmond Barry did this and did this, and you're kind of like, did he? Like, it's more complex again than it probably looks on the surface, but the only thing I could say about Barry Lyndon is everybody should watch it because it's definitely an underseen gem in his catalogue. I
always forget that he also did Dr. Strangelove, which is an out-and-out comedy. That's like a farcical...
Yeah, Barry Lyndon's not that level. Yeah. It's a different kind of comedy, but yeah, Dr. Strangelove is as much a Peter Sellers film as it is a Kubrick film.
You think of Kubrick as this very intense, dark-eyed, staring maniac.
Yeah.
But he made the one of the wackiest films.
And there's comedy to be found in all of his films, probably. I mean, There's,
Yeah, they look pretty hard for it in some of them.
Well, certainly. I mean, Clockwork Orange has got this really dark sense of humor, like going through it. But yeah, definitely Barry Lyndon is, again, just to go back to my pick of the week.
Cool. So let's talk about a little bit of news. I should have had a word with you before we started recording because there are 2 trailers on the news list, which I don't know if you've seen, but I have.
Oh yeah.
Did you see the trailer for Andy Serkis's other Jungle Book movie, which is now called Mowgli?
Yes.
Did you see the Jon Favreau Jungle Book?
Yes.
What do you think this looks like?
It looks a little bit like the Jon Favreau Jungle Book. I thought the Jon Favreau Jungle Book was pretty awesome. I really liked it. I don't see there being an issue with there being a new version because it looks like it's a sort of slightly different take on it all.
Yeah, like, I mean, I kind of rolled my eyes a little bit when the trailer said, like, the darkest retelling. It's like, okay, we've had that for the last 10 years.
We're Nolanizing the Jungle Book. But the Jungle Book is a dark story. It's actually been told in a lighter fashion because of the Disney version.
Jon Favreau's one was a kind of live-action remake of the Disney movie. This is an adaptation of the book.
The Rudyard Kipling original book.
So there's no King Louis. There's no songs. It's very much just about Mowgli, the boy, the wolf boy cub, man cub.
Sure.
And kind of, it seems like it focuses a lot more on him and his kind of place within the human community versus the animal community and him growing up and stuff. It looks very good.
It looks solid,
in terms of like the technical CGI aspects of it.
Sure. And Andy Serkis is proven to be a good director. Apparently, his I think it was his debut directorial film last year, Breathe.
Yeah.
I didn't see it, but I've heard nothing but good things about it from people I know who've seen it.
Is he voicing anyone in this one? Do you know?
I'm not sure. It wouldn't surprise me if he was doing some mocap on it. That's for sure.
Definitely. I know the cast is like Christian Bale's in it and
Kate Blanchett.
Yeah, Kate Blanchett.
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
similarly to the last Jungle Book movie, like it's a stellar cast. It's just so strange that they're so close to each other.
I believe this one was already in production when, or they kind of went into production at the same time, and they sort of stopped production on Mowgli for a little while to kind of let things die down.
Idea, yeah.
But yeah, interesting to see. I mean, there's plenty of different stories to take from the same source material, I suppose.
I don't think it'll do nearly as well as the Disney one.
No, it doesn't sound like it's going to be marketed so much at kids either. It's going to be marketed probably more at the young adult, or just general adult audience. Yeah.
This is interesting. This has not been confirmed yet, but a lot of news outlets are saying that Jake Gyllenhaal is going to play Mysterio in the sequel to Spider-Man: Homecoming.
Yeah. Love Jake Gyllenhaal. Love Spider-Man: Homecoming. Don't have a clue who Mysterio is.
Well, let me tell you.
Please.
You may recognise the way he looks. He kind of dresses. He has like a blue suit, a big flowing pink cape, and like kind of
fishbowl in his head.
Dome, yeah. Kind of it's filled with mysterious smoke. His deal is that he was like a kind of special effects guy. He worked in like a visual effects for like film and theatre and stuff like that. So he's all into like pyrotechnics and illusions and stuff like that. And like all Spider-Man villains, he decides to rob banks. So I wonder if they are going to keep it quite low key in the same way that Vulture was. He didn't have grand ambitions of taking over the world. He
just had
he
had a family to feed.
Yeah. But like you said, Jake Gyllenhaal, I think he's fantastic.
One of my favourites.
Absolutely, yeah.
Nocturnal Animals was my favourite film from, was it a couple of years ago that came out?
Yeah, you saw that a bunch of times.
Yeah.
I saw it once, loved it, but that was enough for me. Like
I wanted to suffer through it 3 or 4 times. I absolutely adored it.
Is that the one you fainted during?
No, that was Green Room.
All right,
that's a whole other story.
Yeah. But yeah, like if you see Jake Gyllenhaal in like not Zodiac, although that's fantastic.
Every week.
Nightcrawler.
Yes.
He can definitely play a creepy, unsettling anti-hero.
Can he ever?
I think he's really versatile. He can be the leading man. He can be like a gay cowboy.
Yeah.
I think he's a great choice. It's surprising that he hasn't been picked for a kind of a bigger role as like a hero thus far.
Well, he was rumoured to be taking over from Ben Affleck and as Batman for a while.
Do you know, actually, aside, he has kind of history with the Spider-Man franchise. When they were making Spider-Man 2, after the success of the first Spider-Man,
Yep.
Tobey Maguire wanted a pay increase. And,
were they thinking of bringing Gyllenhaal in as a replacement?
well, Sony basically were like, we don't want to give you a pay increase, and so that's it. And he was like, oh, well, I'm going to walk in. And then we're like, okay, well, then Jake Gyllenhaal's on the phone, and he's ready to step in. So
Wow.
Tobey Maguire said, okay, forget about the pay increase then, I'll stay as Peter Parker.
Okay.
So it became very close to getting Gyllenhaal as Spider-Man.
That would have been
Spider-Man 2.
around the era of Donnie Darko and stuff, right? Not long after Donnie
Not long
Darko.
after, 2004, I think Spider-Man 2 would have been.
Cool.
So it's interesting now that he's back to this. Similarly with Donald Glover, like he was, they were always talking about him for Spider-Man, and as Miles Morales, he voiced him in the animated show.
Sure.
And he ended up in Spider-Man: Homecoming.
But he plays Miles Morales' like cousin or uncle.
Uncle, I guess, yeah. It's weird how these people gravitate towards Spider-Man eventually.
Yeah. These guys are doing all right without needing to be like in superhero movies, though.
Yeah, and it's good that they're going after good actors for the villain roles. 'Cause
yeah, absolutely.
It means people will complain less about the trite argument of, oh, they never serviced the villains well enough.
It pays dividends to get good, talented people in front of and behind the camera. So certainly looking forward to checking that out.
I would have thought Mysterio was too goofy, but then I also thought Vulture was too goofy, or the Mandarin was too goofy.
They've sort of set the tone for how they're going to go about these movies. They can kind of, they can pull off these villains. They're not going to do it the Stan Lee, Steve Ditko version, because, that was what, the 60s?
Yeah.
A lot of the old Spider-Man stuff is goofy as anything. So it's all modern. Yeah. You've got Spider-Man now with his smartphone and his, I don't know, what do the young people use nowadays?
It's Snapchat.
So, yeah, it's different. So it'll be cool. Homecoming was a unexpected joy, I thought. So.
Did you see the trailer for the Happy Time Murders?
No, I did not.
I don't know about it, man. It's like it's Melissa McCarthy.
Oh wait, no, I did see this. It was shit. yeah, it was garbage. Yeah, I don't want to talk about this. It was terrible. Like the comedy was awful in the trailer. That's where you expect the comedy's at least going to work.
Yeah,
am I right?
It was very like, I feel like I could have written it.
Yeah,
it's very obvious.
This is the sort of Sesame Street characters.
Yeah, if you don't know what it is, it's like a crime detective thing, except it's basically Who Framed Roger Rabbit, except instead of cartoon characters, it's Sesame Street puppets.
But it didn't. The interaction between Melissa McCarthy and the puppets was so fake looking. It didn't feel like they were in the same place.
Yeah, and does
that make sense?
I got no sense of like who anyone was, other than like there's colourful puppets here and everyone's cool with that. Like,
yeah,
it just seemed like, oh, we're gonna say fuck, and then there's gonna be a joke about jizz, and then isn't that funny because it's a puppet?
It's like Sausage Party kind of played that card a few years ago.
And I hated that movie.
I actually quite liked
I
Sausage
hated it.
Party. Yeah.
It's, every joke would just like, oh, fuck, I'm a sausage.
Yeah, I'm a stone sausage.
Every joke, man.
Oh well. Yeah, it was garbage, the trailer. I thought it looked shit. And I've not been to see Melissa McCarthy's new movie. She's not a big box office draw for me.
No.
People seem to always make excuses for her, though. I know that Rotten Tomatoes critics' consensus for that Life of the Party is, oh, Melissa McCarthy is so great, but even she can't save this movie. It's like, man, stop apologizing for people. Like, like, she's not that great. She's been in some great stuff, and she's been good in some stuff. But, like, you can't keep saying in all of her shitty movies it's not her fault. It's like, come on, man. Like, it's everybody's fault.
She's been riding the goodwill from, like, Bridesmaids and, like, her SNL appearances and stuff for a long time.
And you know that I like Spy a fair bit, I think.
Spy's alright, but, like, I mean, Jason Statham was the star of that movie.
Yeah, he was great in that movie, you're quite right. Yeah.
This is a good story. Spielberg and DiCaprio are maybe going to reunite for a biopic of Ulysses S. Grant.
Sure.
He was Lincoln's general in the Civil War.
I know who you... Oh, yeah.
I'm telling you.
You're telling the people.
And he, played a big part in the abolition of slavery. He defeated, what's his name, the guy that the right-wing idiots want a statue of.
The what?
The guy, the racist Southern guy who the protest the statue being removed of. Ulysses S. Grant is the good one, and then it's the other one. Robert E. Lee, is that his name?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah,
like we can cut this bit.
But yeah, he like kind of famously defeated him and stuff.
Yeah, he led,
not in like a hand-to-hand fight or anything.
He led the North to victory
Exactly,
in the
yes.
American Civil War. I believe was also played by John Wayne in How the West Was Won, which was a film I watched recently.
Oh boy, John Wayne, really?
Very small cameo. How the West Was Won, which stars like 100 actors and had 3 directors.
John Wayne, though.
John Wayne was great in John Ford films, and John Ford was directing that segment of the film, so it was fine.
But this is good, man. Like Spielberg has, it'd be a weird kind of like sister film to Lincoln, you know?
Yeah, sure.
And it's it's a good time for a movie like this to come along, I guess.
I don't really. I mean, yeah. I think Spielberg doesn't really excite me that much these days. He makes some competent, fun movies, and some. I thought The Post was much better than Ready Player One.
DiCaprio does excite me still, though.
Sure.
If you know what I mean.
I think I do. Why are you looking at me like that?
So that sounds good.
Yeah. I mean, those two are talented, and they worked on, I guess, Catch Me If You Can was the last time they worked together.
Yeah, it was ages
a while ago. Good film.
That is a good film.
Yeah. It'll not be the same kind of film with a Ulysses S. Grant biopic, though, that's for sure.
Probably not as zippy.
Sure.
This week on Netflix, I saw the new Martin Freeman zombie drama, I guess you'd call it.
I like the sound of it. Cargo.
It's called Cargo, yeah. Martin Freeman. This will sound like I'm giving away too much, but this isn't the trailer. This is the whole kind of crux of the movie. The zombie apocalypse has happened. It's set in the outback of Australia, and Martin Freeman is bitten and has 48 hours before he'll kind of finally turn. But he has a toddler, like a kind of like a no older than 2-year-old girl,
infant child,
that he is trying to get to safety before he bites the dust and becomes a zombie. And it was pretty good.
Solid sounding premise. I really like the sound of the premise.
As with every zombie movie, I wrote a Letterboxd review, kind of just having a bit of a complaint about how there's no genre kind of more well worn with less to say than the zombie movie. Like, there's only so much you can do with it, and every movie inevitably is, the zombies the baddies, but are the humans the real baddies?
Sure.
That's always the way it goes.
It's like any good zombie movie, it's never really about the zombies anyway.
It's always used to like reflect a cultural issue or a social issue of the time or something like that.
Sure. Night of the Living Dead racism, Dawn of the Dead consumerism.
All that sort of stuff.
Exactly.
Yes, you know what I'm talking about.
I do.
Whereas this is much more focused on just being a really solid kind of drama about parents and what they were doing for the children in the face of like just the worst shit, like just absolute hopelessness.
Oh, sure.
And it's good. Martin Freeman's really good in that. I think maybe it's because I've always liked The Office. Like, I think he's like a really likable screen presence. He has that kind of understated like, I've got to keep going with this attitude. But you can tell like inside he's just like, there's one moment where he just kind of screams into the air, and he looks like he's barely keeping it together. But I think he's really you empathise with him a lot.
Okay.
Set in the outback of Australia, where you don't really see a lot of films take place.
Why is he out there as an English guy? Is he like holidaying there when it happens or something?
He's married to an English woman.
An
Australian woman. Yeah.
Okay, I just wondered why, just as a sort of slight point, why he would be there as an English guy.
I would assume just because he's a bit more of a name.
Oh, sure. In terms of like the behind the scenes stuff, that's why. I wondered how they would get that into the plot if he worked there or whatever.
They don't mention
it's not really important.
Like the film starts and the world has gone to shit long ago.
You're thrown into it right there. That's cool, man. Like, I like a zombie film that does that.
And it has, because he has literally a ticking clock on his wrist telling him he has 40 hours, that really propels the movie forward. Like, you always are kind of aware of where you are in the story and how long is left to go.
Great.
And it's good, yeah. It's got a kind of interesting new visual thing for how zombies look and how they act, which is hard to do, being that it's, like I said, so well worn. But there's nothing that original. Like I say, there's not that much you can do in the zombie genre, but it does enough to distinguish itself. And even just by the fact that it's a Netflix movie that isn't the Cloverfield Paradox or Bright or just something like this.
The thing is, a lot of the Netflix movies that people have watched, the kind of bigger names, are the lesser movies. Like, they're not great. Netflix have got some really solid stuff in their catalogue that just goes unseen because they don't do a great job of promoting it.
Yeah.
So there's so many things that come out on Netflix. I've seen quite a lot of really good Netflix originals. One that comes to mind is The Incredible Jessica Jones, which is this comedy that had Chris O'Dowd in it from last year.
Sure, it's Jessica Jones?
Wait, The Incredible Jessica something. It won't be Jessica Jones because that's the Marvel series, right? So there you go. That's how much it stuck with me. You know my memory is shit for these things, but it was a great comedy. The Incredible. Oh, come back to me maybe, but next week. So yeah, Netflix have got that kind of quality control issue, but I think a lot of the bigger ones that they seem to have in their catalogue that people are watching aren't the best. So people assume all Netflix films are shit.
Yeah, and if it's not got a big name in it, they won't give it a chance.
Yeah, there's that.
And also a Netflix series. This is a 4-part documentary series called Evil Genius. Did you ever hear the story about a pizza guy who had a bomb strapped to his neck and was told to rob a bank?
Yes.
Well,
I remember it in the news.
Yeah, is that story of kind of the people behind that and just all the kind of really out there, unbelievable things that went on with that case. If you like your true crime docudramas, check it out. It's 4 episodes. It's pretty brief, and I would thoroughly recommend it. It was the guys that did. It was the guys that did the recent one about the cult in America that I talked about.
Wild
Country. Yes.
Yeah.
Jay and Mark Duplass, the Duplass brothers. But what about you? What have you seen this week, old and new?
So I saw another documentary this week, which I actually liked a fair bit more than the one that we were discussing earlier, Filmworker. I saw this one called Mansfield 6667. So it's about the last 2 years of Jane Mansfield's life and the way, like, basically her last few years were quite chaotic, and she had this sort of friendship with Anton LaVey, who is the founder of the Church of Satan, and it's kind of about this curse that he was alleged to have put on her third or fourth husband at the time, who was a sort of not a very nice character. And is it possible that curse backfired and it actually was the result of why she died in a car crash? The curse was your husband will die in a car crash because you don't want him around anymore. And
she died in a car crash?
She and her husband and I think her agent all died in a car crash together. So there was this idea like, oh, did he cause that? But there's
I've not seen it, but yes, 100% he did.
There's some cool kind of ideas. There's some talking heads there who are like, well, obviously if someone tells you you're cursed to die in a car crash, if that stays on your mind, you're going to be thinking about overthinking your driving to the point of you probably will die in a fucking car crash at some point because you're constantly worried about maybe there is, I don't know. Like
I can't remember the word for it, but it's
sure. So you're like overly concerned about a thing to the point where you're going to do it. It's like fulfilling a prophecy.
Yeah, a self-fulfilling prophecy. That's what I was thinking of,
So it was good. Like I said in my Letterboxd review, I have always been a sucker for things satanic and occult related. So it really, it was my kind of thing right from the get-go. It's got some weird sort of amateur dramatic stuff from students at Leeds Beckett University. It's a joint UK-US production.
What is there, like reenactments?
Like reenactments in between, because there's loads of like archival footage, and Jane Mansfield's personality, man, is like something else. Like you have to see it to like believe it. She's this very busty blonde, sort of intended to be a replacement to Marilyn Monroe when she was going out of fashion a little bit.
There's that great picture of like as an award show, and she's sitting there with like a really low cut dress on,
falling out of it.
Yeah, and like I think it's Liz Taylor sitting beside her, looking down at her like, giving her a total like side eye, like, oh my god, look at you.
Who does she think she is? There's like a bit in the documentary where they talk about when she like her and her husband like barged in on like this film festival in the States somewhere, like uninvited, and they like were asked to leave because they were dragging down the prestige of the film festival by being there. So it's such an interesting story. I've always been interested in Anton LaVey as well. It's very much split between like there's a big chunk devoted to Jane Mansfield, then a big chunk devoted to the Church of Satan, Satanism, Anton LaVey. They've got Kenneth Anger on there, who we briefly discussed a few weeks back, who did Scorpio Rising and a bunch of like really good short films in the 60s and 70s. He's 91 now. Oof. My God, he doesn't look it, but he looks like an old enough guy, but you'd never think he's 91. So he was a personal friend of Anton LaVey. He was an attendee of the very first satanic funeral. So Kenneth Anger was a big friend with like Rolling Stones and everyone who was involved with the sort of satanic church in the early days. So his insight was really cool. It's already finished in cinemas. It literally was out for 2 days, but I'm sure it will again find a home on like your Netflix or your video on demand services.
I would check that out. Yeah.
I think maybe Amazon Prime has a little hand in the production, so I wouldn't be surprised to see it come up on there pretty soon.
You've got a whole bunch of old stuff that you watch, but I don't know that we have time to get into that.
Nah,
Is there any in particular you want to single out?
I saw A Time to Live and A Time to Die, which was a Douglas Sirk film, which was awesome. World War II thing. Check it out. I saw Jeanne Dielman, 23 Quai du Commerce, 1025 Bruxelles. I think I've said that right.
Is that all the title?
People just call it Jeanne Dielman. It's a legendary sort of static camera film, which was surprisingly engaging for over 3 hours.
Oh my god.
Again, check out if you can. It's a really well-renowned film. I saw Open Your Eyes, which was the original Vanilla Sky.
Oh, right. Okay, yeah.
Which was phenomenal. I absolutely loved it. I'd never seen Vanilla Sky either, so I'm going to try and hunt
Penelope
that down.
Cruz also in that, yeah?
She is, yeah. She's just amazing in it. She's beautiful and just plays the role perfectly. And I watched The Dead Zone last night, which is an old Stephen King adaptation from the 80s with Christopher Walken, which was pretty solid. Final act was a little bit rushed, which is a thing that happens with a lot of Stephen King adaptations, I think, because that's how he writes. Yeah, it was solid. That one was on Filmstruck, as was Open Your Eyes, and John Dielman and A Time to Live and A Time to Die were on Movie. So
cool.
Yeah, they were all pretty decent.
Well, that brings us to the end of the show. Next week's a big one. We're going to be talking about Solo, a Star Wars story, which I think needs no explanation.
Yep, but it needs a better title.
Yeah.
Whoever thought of this I think they've already thrown it out the window, though, these Star Wars story films. Like, they haven't got any more in production right now. I think they've already given up.
Yeah, now that you mention that, they haven't
got another Star Wars.
Although Celebration is any day now, isn't it?
Yeah, they're starting a bunch of other things, though. I think they realised that idea to tell these sort of like filling in the gaps backstories is not really that exciting.
Yeah. And they've got Rian Johnson doing his other trilogy.
And the Game of Thrones guys are doing a trilogy as well.
And Jon Favreau's doing a TV show.
Yeah. So yeah, they're kind of doing different things. But I'm kind of looking forward to checking out how it looks. I've already read very mixed responses to it.
It's sitting at like 71, 73, I think, on Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah, I don't think anyone's like gushing over it, though. Those 71% are sort of mainly lukewarm reviews.
Yeah, I'm prepared to think it was alright.
Yeah, like we said last week, as long as it's if it's anywhere like that Train Job episode of Firefly, like, I'll be happy if it's even half as good as that.
Yeah, but even like an alright film that has Star Wars on it is going to make it better in my eyes.
It's sad in a way, but like, I kind of know exactly where you're coming from. Yeah. You go easy on a film if it's like the logo that you like. Yeah. There's a little bit of that.
If it has the spaceships that I like and the robots that I like and stuff, you know.
Sure. But that's all the mise en scène, Alan.
That's a big part, you know. That's what sticks with you, the images in your head. Also a movie called Edie.
Yep. So this week coming, Edie, to try and overcome a lifetime of bitterness and resentment, an older lady decides to climb a mountain in Scotland.
Way!
Yeah, that's where we live. It's meant to be very good.
Who's in it?
I don't know. Why would you ask me that?
I don't know.
It's clearly not written on our show notes.
On Chesil Beach.
Yeah, it came out last week in London, which is a strange thing. Like, to get
I feel like
that
I've written
nowadays.
this off just because of the name of it.
Well, it's an Ian McEwan book who did Atonement.
Uh-huh.
It's a romance based in 60s England. It looks decent. It's got Saoirse Ronan in it. I love her.
She is good, yep.
So that's a big sell for me. I'm going to try and catch it the weekend.
There's a few more things. Show Dogs.
Garbage.
The Breadwinner.
Looks amazing. The Breadwinner was shown at the film festival. About a girl in Afghanistan disguising herself as a boy in order to provide for her family. It's meant to be fantastic.
Oh, like Mulan.
Is that like Mulan? It's also like a
Mulan,
movie.
She disguises herself as a boy to join the Chinese army.
Oh, okay. So that's meant to be good. It's an Irish movie.
All right.
Yeah.
And Zama, which we would have both seen the trailer for before Filmworker.
Yes, the trailer looked awesome for it. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah. About Spanish movie. Yeah. Spanish language movie. I don't know.
Yeah, set in the 17th century. Yeah, it looked awesome. I'm looking forward to checking it out. It's riding high on the top 100 on Rotten Tomatoes at the moment.
That's a good sign. And some other stuff on Netflix which we can maybe talk about next week.
Yep.
But that brings us to the end. If you want to get in touch with us, I actually had a few notes from some friends, but I've left it too long to bring it up now. So So, my friend Sean said to us that the artist who can't draw legs that was referenced in Deadpool was a reference to Rob Liefeld, who was a kind of a controversial comic book author and artist in the 90s, who kind of brought back a lot of. He wrote a lot for Deadpool, and he had a tendency to draw people like as like massive, like overly muscly, buff, like kind of extreme 90s dudes.
Sure.
But he was shit at drawing feet, so that was the joke there.
Well, thank you to your friend
Sean.
Thank you, Sean.
And Paco, a friend from another Glasgow film podcast, Raptors in the Kitchen, wanted to let us know that he also thought Domino was awesome.
Quite right.
Yes. If you want to get in touch with us, you can do it at CinematicPod on Twitter. You can email us at cftppod@gmail.com. I personally am at SuperDiscoBacon on Twitter and on letterboxd.com, where you can find all my film reviews.
Yep, and I am the Technogoat on Twitter and just Technogoat on Letterboxd, where you can find my very abbreviated film reviews.
So yeah, join us next week when we'll be talking Solo and Star Wars. Fingers crossed, man.
Yeah, couldn't have said it better myself.